We have a real treat this morning. David Johnson is a journeyer, and many of you know him, and is here every week in his place, and especially in terms of this Bible study and an active part, and is a part of one of our Fred groups, is a professor of math at Austin Community College, and is a wonderful, wonderful man who has some great things to share with us this morning. And I think I'm not that Rick was telling me that you recently did a fast, and part of what you're going to share today is what happened to you and kind of some things that you discovered in the middle of that. So I'm thrilled and to be able to introduce to you David Johnson. And so David, come on, it's yours.
Thanks, David. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. I've never put on one of these things before, so I also want to thank Rick, even though he's not here today, for giving me this opportunity to talk to you guys and to share my experience. I wanted to be able to share it because that way it would cement it more for me, give me an opportunity to think through exactly what it was that happened. I completed a 40-day fast, and before you get all excited or worked up over it, I want to be very clear that it wasn't a Jesus fast. It was 40 days of 500 calories per day, and I did an 8-ounce protein shake in the morning and an 8-ounce protein shake in the evening. And so that's what kept me alive. I did not want to have to go to the hospital. Let's put it that way. I don't have health insurance, so otherwise I might have risked it. But I want to thank my friends and also all of you for not stampeding out of here when you found out that Rick was not going to be talking today. And you might be surprised to look at me. One of my friends near the end of the fast said to me, I was expecting more of a Schindler's List sort of thing. And I said, well, I'll work on that next time. So the story of this fast goes back a ways, and I just want to share a couple of the highlights with you. Back in 1992, a very dear friend of mine gave me this book. It's called The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, and it really is the beginning point of my journey to rediscovering the Bible. I'm not a religious person and have kind of avoided religion for most of my life. And this book is written by Catherine Ponder, who is a Christian woman, and I thought, well, this is nonsense. But after I read it, it really had an impact on my life. And there was chapter 3, and I'm just going to read one short passage from it. She talks about the Vaccum Law of Prosperity. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is that, and I first discovered it here, is that in order to really get anything into your life, anything worthwhile, you have to get rid of something. And I think that's probably a theme that a lot of you have heard. But she said it to me first. She said, basically, the Vaccum Law of Prosperity is this. If you want greater prosperity in your life, start forming a vacuum to receive it. In other words, get rid of what you don't want to make room for what you do want. And I took that very seriously. And then years passed, and then I discovered Journey, actually thanks to Deanne, who made me aware of Journey. And when I joined Journey, I read Wrestling with God, which is Rick Diamond's book. If you haven't read it, you really should. It's a wonderful book, and you should mention to him that he needs to write another book because he's such a good writer and has a lot of good things to say. But there are a couple of things that have to do with fasting and that I want to read just real quick. And also he has a chapter, it's called Welcome to the Desert. And one of the themes for me, not only in this book, but in the fast that I undertook, was to be in the desert. And I've jokingly told people that I wanted to be more like Jesus. But there was an element of truth to that. Jesus was a great man and inspired billions of people, and I wanted to know what that was all about. So how do you go into the desert, and why do you go into the desert? It turns out it's talked about a lot in this book. In fact, it's a good part of the book. We'll read that one. One spiritual exercise that can get your attention is fasting. And this is Rick talking. Jesus fasts, goes without food for 40 days. To go without food is a way for you to stop thinking about other things. And if you have never been through a long fast, you can be sure that that's what happens, that you stop thinking, ironically, you stop thinking about food. And, there's the occasional fantasy. There was the pizza fantasy and the chocolate chip cookie fantasy, but basically you stop thinking about food and you start thinking about other things. And that's really what the goal of this exercise was. And there's a book in print now, and I'm sorry I don't remember the name of the author or the name of the book, but it talks about fasting, in particular the 40-day fast, and it says that if you fast for any reason other than spiritual, you're engaging in vanity. If you're doing it to lose weight, if you're doing it to make yourself look better, then you're doing it for the wrong reason. Now, I can't always say that I wasn't thinking about those other things, but especially when you see the shrinkage that took place. But, okay. And he also goes on to say, but Jesus' temptation isn't about how strong he is, it's about what he trusts. So this isn't about how strong a person is who fasts. It's about what you believe in, what you rely on, how you get through the day when you're fasting. Because anybody can do it, no matter how strong or weak you are. Okay? Anybody can do this kind of fast. And finally, I just want to mention another passage he wrote. And this is Rick. What leads to sin? Anything we refuse to let go of. The desert is the place for stripping small things away in order to find the bigger things, the real things. So, with those inspirations available to me, I had wanted to do this fast for a long time. And actually, it was just fear that I couldn't actually complete it that was preventing me, and then also not knowing why I was doing it for real. So I sort of put that aside. One day I just said, the time is right to try to do this, and it was very spontaneous. So anyway, one of the when Rick and I talked about me giving this talk, he asked me to focus on three things during the talk. He said, talk about the experience itself, talk about why you decided to do this, and also talk about what you learned from it. And I put off preparing the talk as long as I could. Let's just say I didn't write these notes until last night, because I couldn't figure out what I had learned from it. It's not that I hadn't learned anything, but it just wasn't clear to me. And so I'll talk about that at the end. And I've already talked a little bit about why I did it, but more things will emerge. However, I did write a list on my very first day of the fast. I knew that I wouldn't remember why I was trying to do this, and so I had to, I wrote it actually on my computer with my fingers doing this, and then when I went back and looked at the list at the end, not much had changed, except I added a few lines at the end, which I'll talk about later. But let me just quickly read through the list, and this is not in any particular order, and and unedited, basically. So it's just a set of bullet items. Still the mind. Focus on the important. Make time for the important. And I see those as two different things. Exercise a discipline. And the word disciple and discipline are related. And so I've always been a big believer in discipline, although sometimes I'm not always that disciplined. Rest the body. When you go without food for a long period of time, when you limit your calorie intake to 500 calories a day, your metabolism goes way down. Rest the mind. Maybe that's like still the mind, but I thought of them as different things. Cleanse the body. My dad, who I talk to every week, he reminded me that, one of the reasons for doing this was the body is a temple. And so one might be inspired to cleanse the body occasionally. Cleanse the mind. Okay? In my case, that's really hard to do, but you can try. Feel better. I think until you feel better about yourself, it's going to be hard to feel better about the world, and so on. Be grateful. Just sometimes the fact that you're still alive. During the fast, my brother wrote me a couple of times and said, "You've stopped blogging. I'm worried that you've died." So be grateful. Become who I should be. I have no idea what that is. Improve my health. Yeah, okay. Live better. That can be interpreted many different ways. Live longer. That's something everybody should hope for. Understand myself better. There's certain things that you can't know about yourself until you go through an experience like this. I mean, you just can't imagine how you're gonna react, what you're gonna think, and also what people are how they're gonna relate to you differently. Become more conscious. That certainly happens. Become less habit-driven. So I wasn't going every day to get my chocolate chip cookie at the bookstore. And I wasn't sitting in front of the TV eating every meal. Okay? Be an example for others. I can't say that I am, but that's maybe something that people should aspire to. And the last was increase my faith. Faith in what? I don't know. But I've always said faith in the world, faith in people, faith in yourself. And if there is a God, faith in that. Okay? So, and then that was the end of my list. So there's a few that I added, but I'll talk about them a little later. And then I have some things I want to mention as far as the experience itself goes. So 40 days it really doesn't seem like that long. 40 days, that's a little bit more than a month. And months go by, years go by, especially as you get older, they go by faster. And so 40 days didn't seem like it was going to be such a big deal. But when you're in the middle of a fast, 40 days seems like it's forever. And there's something significant about 40, and you know all about that, right? I did a little bit of research in the Bible and elsewhere. Actually, The Purpose-Driven Life, I don't know if you've read that book. I have the book. I've looked at parts of it. But the very first thing he does, Rick Warren, right, starts off with a discussion of the 40-day thing. And he breaks his book into 40 chapters. And he recites all of the different places where 40 days appears in the Bible. And a lot of things I didn't know. And I'm not going to be able to recite them all now. But and then there's references to near 40, which, like 39. Does anybody know what that reference is? I think it's 39 lashes when Jesus is being whipped before he's crucified, which is ironic because 39 is the number before 40. And I'd never thought about that before. So anyway, so starting the fast, I've already said, it mostly spontaneously. I just said, okay, screw it, I'm going to do it. My initial weight at that point was 212 pounds. About one day into it, and I'd started blogging, my brother, who lives in Germany, reads my blog occasionally, and he wrote back immediately, said, "You're going to die." He said, stop the fast, declare victory, and move on. And I almost said ignore, but then I said, well, maybe he's got a point. And that's when I started with the idea of the protein shakes, because I didn't want to die. He told me about the story of a famous magician who locked himself in a box for 44 days with nothing but water, and they had to take him to the hospital, and I didn't want to be that guy. So from the beginning, my mantra was, I'm in the desert. I'm in the desert. This is me in the desert, okay? And I began to realize after a while that it wasn't so bad to be in the desert, having things burn off slowly. We'll talk more about that. I had ketosis for the first 3 days. Now, those of you who don't know what ketosis is, it's the body metabolizing fat, which is a good thing. Some people have this mistaken notion that it's a bad thing. By the way, morning breath does exist. Ketosis turns your body chemistry into basically ketones, and which are not real good smelling things. And it's like formaldehyde, you know. That's what your morning breath is. It's just ketosis manifesting itself. But interestingly, I figured, okay, this is going to continue for 40 days. 3 days, it was done. And I was shocked. And it took me a while to figure out that the reason it had stopped is not that my sense of smell went away. It's that my metabolism had plummeted. I was now relaxed. And I could do this. I knew I would make it. I had no cravings. Once you get past that 3-day point, you're not even thinking about food, except for that occasional fantasy. But until day 38. And we'll get to day 38. I wrote in my blog for 12 days, and a few people responded, but basically it just wasn't doing it for me, and so I stopped writing in my blog. I guess I don't know. I was in the desert, and trying to communicate the experience at that point was taking more energy than I could muster. And so I said, well, I'll put this off later. You know, I'll write about this stuff later. Although I did have plenty of energy to do things like tile my house and work in the yard and teach my math classes at ACC at that point every day because of the summer schedule. And only a couple of times did I get lightheaded, and that's because part of my job is tutoring, and I have to be on my feet a lot. And only twice did I feel lightheaded enough that I had to sit down in 40 days. I slept more and better. That was mostly because I didn't have anything else to do. I told my friends, I can't have dinner with you. I can't have lunch with you. I can't even see you because you're just going to talk about food. I made some exceptions. I attended Fred group meetings, and I did attend a going away lunch, which was brutal. But I had the support of my friends, and that was very important. Although there was some skepticism from friends, certain friends, so they'd hear about it either through my Facebook page or through my blog, and they'd say, "What's this all about? 40 days fasting? Why? Why you? Why are you fasting? 40 days?" Ignore. I don't have the energy or the time to deal with it right now. And I was inspired by actually the person who gave me this book, which I talked about at the opening. She grew up in an abusive environment. Her mother was gone a lot, and her stepfather, who had his natural-born son, living with them, the stepfather and the son would sit in the kitchen and eat real food, meat, potatoes, food that you want to eat, right? But they would not let her eat anything except like boxed cereals, and so they denied her food for long periods of time, except for the bare minimum, whatever they thought wasn't worth them eating. And she told me once that her goal in life was to get to a point where she would be able to eat anything she wanted. And so I figured if she could live through that, I could make it through a lousy 40-day fast. Okay? One of the things that happened during my fast is I started to make decisions about my life. And I won't go into all the details because they're personal. But I do want to mention that when you've created this vacuum, when you're in the desert, when you're not bothering about unimportant things like food, you do have the opportunity to think about important things. And also you have the courage to actually act on them, which I couldn't have anticipated. Because quite frankly, you don't have anything else to do. So why not just do them, okay? And so you make the phone calls, or you write the letters, or you go visit the people or the places or whatever you have to do, because you might as well. And as a part of that process, I found that I started to love myself more. Now, some of you may think, well, he loves himself a lot already. But, part of that is just an act. And part of it is just programming. And part of it is just misinterpretation on your part. And so, but, when you're taking these steps to do what's important, you start to think, well, why is it important? And who's it important to? And so you going without food it may seem like self-punishment, but it's actually a gift that you're giving yourself. And so without that self-love, there's a lot of things in your life that you can't do. You can't be a good parent. You can't be a good spouse or partner or whatever. And you can't be good in all the other areas of your life that are important, like financial or health or whatever. So, but I must tell you, there are temptations. And when you're on a 40-day fast, there are serious temptations. I mean, really life, gut-wrenching temptations. Temptations that will tear at your being, like the peanut butter cookie. Okay. I was at work one day at ACC doing my tutoring thing, and there was a lull, and one of my coworkers, another tutor, on her way out, dropped this peanut butter cookie right in front of me. It was wrapped in plastic. It was near the end of the day, so, I'm hungry, and I hadn't thought about peanut butter cookies at that point for about, let's see, I think this was like day 20 or day 37, day 38, thereabouts. And I look back as she's walking out the door, and she looks at me and then races out. And so I'm looking down at this peanut butter cookie, which is literally the finest peanut butter cookie in the entire world. Because I could smell it, right? Through that plastic wrap, it's just wafting up, right? I never knew that peanut butter cookies wafted like that. And I was near the end of my shift, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do with this cookie? Okay. I guess I could take it home and freeze it. That makes sense. I'll take it home and freeze the cookie. Now, I must tell you, I've never frozen a cookie. No cookie has ever survived long enough for me to freeze it. Well, I wasn't quite done with my day. I had to teach a class. And so I end the shift, and I take this cookie with me upstairs to the faculty office, and it's sitting there wafting all through the office, and all of these people are sitting around looking at me. What's this thing with the cookie? And I couldn't prepare for my lecture because I was so focused on that damn cookie. I was sitting right there in front of the computer, and I thought, well, nobody will know if I eat the cookie, right? Nobody in this office knows that that I'm on a fast. I'm thinking, I can't take this cookie in with me to the classroom because it's just going to call out to me there. My students are going to say, why are you carrying a cookie? Why don't you just eat the thing? So I thought, well, if I eat it, then I'm betraying my entire commitment to everybody that I've told I'm on this fast. And it would be, if I don't eat it, it would be disrespectful to the cookie and to the woman who cooked it for me, baked it. So I'm going back and forth like this. I mean, I'm spending more time than I probably should to describe this incident because this was the moment, okay? The moment of my fast where it all comes down to, is he going to do it or not? And so I can report that I picked up the cookie, and on my way to the classroom, I threw it in the garbage can. And that was the hardest thing I ever had to do in my entire life. But then again, it's not about the strength of the person. It's about what they trust and what they believe in. So I'm nearing the end of the fast, and I started to have some weird thoughts. I found myself thinking, I don't need food at all. I mean, when you think about it, 500 calories a day, and at this point, I'm weighing myself every day, and I'm only, in 1 week, I've lost a pound. Like, what's going on? Not that was bothering me, because I had lost already a lot, but it just seemed weird. Maybe I don't need food at all. Is that possible? I mean, that you don't need food at all? Has anybody ever performed that experiment? Wow, okay. Well, another thought I had was, I will miss this fast. And that was a strange thought. I'm like planning my next fast. Okay, Lent, yeah. Maybe next week. Maybe over Christmas. Who knows? I mean, it's such a good thing, except for the, momentary problems. I also thought I will miss being in the desert. But then I put that thought out of my head because I realized, no, I'm always in the desert. Every day, each one of us is in the desert. I'm just more aware of it now. And on the 39th day of the fast, and by this point I am starting to feel hunger, like this gut-wrenching thing. And I wasn't sure if it was just me thinking about food more or whether there was actually something physiological going on. But anyway, I knew I needed to go to the grocery store because I didn't have any food in the house. I had made sure that wasn't going to be an issue. And so I'm walking through the aisles and I get to the beans and I start crying. Because I'm thinking I'm going to get to eat beans. And partly because when I was in grad school and I didn't have any money, and a friend of mine had said, well, here, I'll show you how to make rice and beans. That had been a very important contribution in my life. So to see this bag of dry beans sitting there, it was just too much for me to take. So I bought my food and went home and put it in the refrigerator. I bought some fruit and I bought a small baked ham and some bread and just a few simple things. And the apple, yeah. All the literature said you should start with watermelon. I'm like, I don't like watermelon. It's too cumbersome. No way you're going to get me slopping around a watermelon. So it's sitting in the fridge, and on the 39th day, which is the same day I bought the groceries, it was also, the 40th day was the day of the Fred group meeting. I was going to eat the next day. So day 40 was the Fred group meeting. That's right. So I show up at the Fred group meeting, and it's at John and Susan Corbin's house. And it was a small gathering that day, but perfect because they had this big piece of carrot cake. Homemade. And it was, it wasn't all eaten. This is the point. It wasn't all eaten by the time I left, and so they gave me what was effectively a large piece of carrot cake to take home, to put in the freezer or something, I don't know. And that's right. So I go to bed, and I wake up the next morning, and I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to have? I'm going to have apple, or am I going to have carrot cake? Well, okay, you guys can guess what I ate. I snarfed down that carrot cake like you would not believe. And it was the most delicious carrot cake I ever ate in my entire life. And so that was the experience. And then, so my first full meal in a restaurant afterwards was at Susie's, which is Anderson Lane and Mopac, and they have Chinese food, and Susie is a wonderful person, and I go there a lot. And ironically, this fortune was in the fortune cookie, and it said, comfort zones are most often expanded through discomfort. So let me just, in closing, and then we'll talk, well, I'll take questions and we can have a discussion. The things I added to my list, actually, there's also, let's see, things I learned. Where's that? Okay, here it is. So the goals, near the end, or at the end, I added overcome temptation. These are reasons to do a 40-day fast. The body is a temple. Sacrifice. I think if you're going to ever do anything in your life, you're going to have to sacrifice. And though I can't ever hope to accomplish in the desert what Jesus accomplished in the desert, you can use a 40-day fast to prepare for the bigger challenges in life. And so what did I learn? I learned I can do it, where it can be defined however. I learned also I'm not alone, and maybe I shouldn't be alone. And that may seem like contradictory, but sometimes I think of myself as alone, but I'm not alone, and I shouldn't be alone. And that's one of the things I need to work on more. I learned I can love myself in spite of all the reasons not to. I learned there is hope, not just for me, but for everything, for anything. And maybe most importantly, I learned that I will always be in the desert. And that's not necessarily a bad thing.